صدق الله العظيم بارك الله فيكم بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the blessed exaltation of what we just heard in the power of kun fayakun, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our hearts full of awe of Him and love of His beloved Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. Inshallah, because we're starting slightly late, so I don't want to take too much time from our dear beloved guest Shaykh Khalil, and we're not going to call him a guest beyond today. Today just because the first time, but now that he's a local, he's moved, alhamdulillah, he's blessed us. He's now come here from Texas and he's officially transitioned into the greater Boston area, living in Cambridge now, alhamdulillah. So we're just going to call him a guest for today, but from now on this is his home and he is the Shaykh, inshallah. Shaykh Khalil is someone that I am blessed to have come to know over the past couple of years. The highlight, I think, of our time together has been a trip to Morocco, where we spent together 9 very beautiful days in Morocco. It was not a simple trip, it was not an easy trip. I think we visited a city every single day, so we were in the bus anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a day. But it was a journey together of remembrance and glorifying of Allah and sending prayers and peace upon our beloved Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and being in the company of righteous people. And so that was a blessing for me and to spend time together with Shaykh Khalil and others. Shaykh Khalil is someone who has really a very profound kind of set of skills, and his credentials are one that make him very suitable to, number one, take on a very challenging post, which he took on now at Harvard University. He's the new Muslim chaplain there, but his roles are not just relegated to chaplaincy, but really it's more of a representative of Islam and Muslims in the Harvard space, in the office of the president. And so his responsibilities are lofty and grand, and so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him thabat, strength to fulfill this obligation in a manner that's pleasing to Allah. And his background is in multiple spaces, bifadlillah. Something interesting about Shaykh Khalil was that he was an imam of a Turkish masjid in New York City, where he actually taught in the Turkish language, because his traditional Islamic training was from Turkey. And so his ijazat, his licensing to teach many of the traditional sciences comes from his scholars and teachers in Turkey, as well as being credentialed from Columbia University, and he did some of his graduate studies there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and now he's completing his PhD from Southern Methodist University in American Islam. And so Shaykh Khalil really marries two beautiful worlds, the world of the Western academic inquiry as well as the Muslim world in the traditional sciences. And now, alhamdulillah, he's bringing all of his expertise in multiple spaces. He also has a background in social work and worked as a social worker for some time. So he touches so many beautiful points, and alhamdulillah, he's bringing all of that to not just Harvard, but really Boston and Massachusetts at large. And so we are gifted really and blessed to have him here, and I am the most excited because I have another Shaykh now. We can inshallah he can bless us here regularly, and I'm sure you'll see his face very often bi'idhnillah. So with that, inshallah, I pass over the mic to our dear Shaykh Khalil to bless us with some guidance until Salatul Maghrib, and then if there are Q&A, we'll try to push that until after Maghrib just because of time. Barakallahu feekum.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رضي الله تعالى عنه وعن كافة المؤمنين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. ما شاء الله, alhamdulillah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue. It's connected, first of all. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to give us barakah in our time, in our actions, in our interpersonal relationships, and most importantly, in our personal relationship with Him, tabaraka wa ta'ala, and His beloved Messenger, Al-Mustafa sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. قال تعالى استعيذ بالله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فسبحان الله حين تمسون وحين تصبحون. So glorify Allah Ta'ala in the evenings and in the morning times. Rough translation. وَلَهُ الْحَمْدُ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَعَشِيًّا وَحِينَ تُظْهِرُونَ. And to Him belongs all of the hamd, all of the praise, in the afternoon and in the late night. يُخْرِجُ الْحَيَّ مِنَ الْمَيِّتِ. So He extracts the living from the dead. يُخْرِجُ الْمَيِّتَ مِنَ الْحَيِّ. And then He takes the dead from the living. وَيُحْيِي الْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا. And He revives the land after it has been decimated and destroyed. كَذَلِكَ تُخْرَجُونَ. And in that same way, you will be revived. One of the meanings of ard in the Quran, one of the spiritual deeper meanings, Ibn Ajiba rahimahullah mentions this in his fabulous tafsir, Bahr al-Madid. One of the meanings of ard is the qalb, the heart. وَيُحْيِي الْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا. Allah Ta'ala revives the heart, revives the spirit, revives the conscious, revives the psyche, revives the inner core of the human being after it's been broken. Helps us rise from the ashes after you've been burnt, after you've been put down, brought down, torn down, beat down, stepped on, abused, discriminated against, hit, turned down. وَيُحْيِي الْأَرْض. Allah Ta'ala revives, Allah Ta'ala resurrects, elevates. So how do we rise from the ashes of being burnt, of being ostracized and abused, of being put down, of being marginalized and cornered? I think this is a very important topic, and there's many different ways we could look at it. But I wanted to briefly highlight representation. Representation. Representation has a profound meaning both in the American historical trajectory. Representation, I mean, this country started with no taxation without. How good your history teachers would be proud of you. Right? No taxation without representation. And so that in a historical context, we could discuss this at one meaning. From a Shari'i Islamic perspective, representation has a profound meaning as well. It has to do with moving from the surah, right, or the majaz to the haqiqah of something, right? So trees, for example, are representation. They're an ayah, for example. Right? But an ayah of what? A representation of what? Yani they mean something. They symbolize something. They stand for something. For that matter, our qiyam and the salah. We stand physically. Well, what good is it if we stand in salat shoulder to shoulder, but we have no standing with each other outside of salat? So our standing in salat should be a rehearsal for our ability to stand outside of salat. As a qawm, which does qiyam. Right? So representation is very meaningful. Because when we represent, then you represent. You display, you show something, you become an ayah or a sign. Now, the American public, and I include myself, and we have to include all of us in that statement, consume, interestingly enough in our times, not facts, nor alternate facts or alternative facts. We consume representations. We're products in our time of theater, film, the digital age, photographs. Okay. We consume representation, sound bites, pictures. That's who we are. Photos. I mean, fake news as well. I was in Turkey one day. I was going to class, and I had this favorite restaurant called Hakiki Kebab. You know, Hakiki means real, right, in Turkish, and of course it comes from the Arabic haqiq, or haqiqa, right, so it's called Hakiki Kebab. So I was going to class one day, and I decided to stop and have lunch at my favorite place, Hakiki Kebab. Oh, I loved Hakiki Kebab. Right, so I was a little late because I was eating, so I went to class and explained to my teacher. This is in a class of Islamic theology, so I explained to my teacher. It was so gentle, mashallah. I said, oh, Afwan, forgive me, I was having lunch, I was delayed. He said, where'd you eat? I said, at Hakiki Kebab. He said, if you told me Majaz Kebab, I'd kick you out the class. So if you're late, be late for the real thing, not some fake thing. Representation. Representation is quite important. Americans consume representations all the time. Now, the interesting thing about consumption is that when you consume something, if you're not careful, and most of us are not careful, you may become consumed by it. Frederick Douglass used to say, talking about the carpenter, he said, a man is worked on by what he works on. Right? A person is worked on by what they work on. Then he said, you might carve out your work. Right? You might be carving something. You might carve out your work, but your work carves you out as well. Now, you think that you're just doing something in your amal. You think you're going about your business, going to work or catching a bus or doing something. You're out there and you might have a conversation or an encounter with people. That person might be affected by the way you look, by the way you dress, by the way you act, right? But you're affected as well. There's a dialectic there. So representation is such that the American public consumes, and they consume information about Islam, and they are, as a result, consumed by it. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. So if we want to look at how we can sort of rise from the ashes of what I mentioned earlier, we have to understand how to represent Islam for a public that thinks a certain way, that acts a certain way, that perceives us in a certain way. And I believe that there are 3, if not 4 ways to understand the contemporary American mind, and there are profound ways to connect those 3 ways or 3 domains with Islam as well. So one is coffee. Any coffee drinkers here? Oh, mashallah. This is the land of Dunkin' Donuts, I should expect, right? Isn't it? Not in Masad, it's not. Oh, it's a misnomer. Not anymore, okay. So coffee. 2, social media or the smartphones. I don't need to ask about that. That has infiltrated everyone's existence. 3, something a little off the cuff, but very relevant to this discussion, zombies. Right, zombies. Very profound when you look at that genre, that art, and the meanings of the zombie phenomenon. Zombie movies began as a critique of society, as a social critique, and mocking and mimicking consumerism. Very interesting, right? And how we actually consume each other. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. And then, of course, now, Islamophobia. So I want to briefly start with coffee. So this is a really profound, interesting thing. I am not a coffee drinker at all. I don't know if that is good or bad, but I am not a coffee drinker. Although, having done a lot of studies and years in Turkey, you learn to drink coffee at lunchtime. So coffee, I don't know if you knew this, But after crude oil, coffee is the second most sought after commodity globally. So after oil, people search for coffee. SubhanAllah. After oil, people demand coffee. Americans, half of Americans consume coffee. That's a current statistic. Half of all Americans consume coffee. 75% of our caffeine, Americans are very caffeinated people, and so are folks around the globe for that matter, but 75% of American caffeine intake is from coffee. Right? Now, what's interesting also is 75% of coffee is produced from Arabica beans, right? Coffee, as you know, is an Islamic import to Europe and then the West. You know the story about Khalid and his goat, right, in Yemen, right? If you don't know the story, read a book called Coffee and Coffee Houses by Ralph Haddix. Right? Actually, Starbucks should be called, Khalid and his goats, right? So coffee is a very interesting phenomenon because literally every American that drinks coffee has a serious debt to Islamic societies. Coffee starts out as this beverage in Muslim societies that is popular around the circles for farmers and workers, right, keeps them up and energized. Then it moves into the circles of the ulama, right, the scholars. So the ulama start drinking coffee, and so, more books are written at night, helps with the qiyam al-layl, right, etc. So coffee is praised early on in Yemen, in Damascus, in the Hijaz, right, Mecca and Medina, Cairo. Then an interesting phenomenon which emerges of the coffee house, right, coffee house. The coffee house becomes the first space in Islamic society, this is a historical fact, the first space in Islamic society that rivals the masjid. So a coffee house opens up across from the masjid. The adhan goes off for salah. People go to salat, and then in the beginning, some people are, you can't just drink coffee quickly. So some people are in the coffee house, sipping on their coffee. Somebody says, oh, salat time. Yes, I'm coming. Drink, sip, sip. Coffee is a slow beverage. It's also a social beverage. So what happens is the coffee houses slowly accumulate people that begin to forego their salah. At night, the coffee houses become full of people that start to have conversations about all kinds of things. Wives begin complaining to the qadis and to the judges and to scholars that their husbands are staying out late at night for the first time, and it's not because they're praying in the masjid. Right. Their husbands are out in the coffee houses gossiping, engaging in male gossip. Right. So it becomes a marital problem. So waste of time. Wives are complaining that their husbands are spending more and more and more time in the coffee houses, more money in the coffee houses. Tobacco starts to be imported. So not only are men drinking coffee, but they're also smoking. Mueddin starts smoking, imam starts smoking and drinking coffee, and it's chaos. The ulama say, hold on for a second. What is this thing that has infiltrated Muslim societies and has created an alternative space where people can be social without any kind of connection to ubudiyah? Before, people were social in the masjid, and at least it was connected to something in the masjid. Now you had a brand new space, and people were social in a way that was disconnected from worshiping Allah, and if anything, encouraged things that may have been makruh or haram, even like gossip. Right? Long story short, coffee becomes a catalyst in the Ottoman Empire for discussion about leisure, and most importantly, for discussion about a change in the psyche. That coffee produces a different kind of thinking person, a different human. Coffee produces the human being that prefers leisure over work. The human being that prefers sitting, the man that prefers male gossip over dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Went the writing. I'm talking about the writing of the ulama now in the Ottoman Empire. Coffee becomes a means for a waste of money, because instead of giving extra money to your family, now you're buying extra cups of coffee. Right? Instead of 1 cup, now you're buying 2 and 3, and you're leaving tips, and you're doing this daily now or weekly now, or etc. So it's adding up. Well, what I find, and I don't have a lot of time, but most striking about the way this conversation went is the fact that the ulama in the Ottoman Empire surmised about the future, about a future society where people live in cities with coffee houses. This is in the 16th century. People live in cities with the coffee houses, and they divide their time up between work and leisure. In other words, leisure time, you have to have equal leisure time as work time. And for scholars of the 16th century, this was a problem, because they felt that when a society has too much leisure time, and then that cuts into not only work time, but time for extra devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when extra, not devotion, extra devotion is decreased, then what happens is that will spill over into a loss of interest in social responsibility. And so what the ulama said is that coffee is not haram. In the beginning it was haram. Some of them made fatwas against it early on. They wanted to ban coffee. But the ulama thought about this and said, well, you know what? Coffee itself is not haram. But what happens is it can lead to a lifestyle where the society as a whole indulges in leisure, and as a result of their indulging in leisure, loving to sit down and relax and trying to take off all the time and trying to decrease the amount of time they spend in the masjid, because of this, you get a problem, a phenomenon where society is not actually drunk, but they are drunk in the, not the hakiki sense, but the majaz sense. They are metaphorically drunken people. So coffee became an introduction to a discourse about human beings who love leisure so much that their indulgence in leisure causes them to lose sight of what's most important and responsibility in society. And that produces an individual who's not really drunk, but they are drunk in the abstract sense. In the same way a drunken person is not focused on what's most important. In the same way a drunken person might lose control of their rational faculties. A drunken person might not be able to speak articulately. A drunken person may not have ihtimam or concern with taking care of their family or spending time with their children. Their concern is the bottle. Their concern is going out and returning back to liquor. Right? So it's an abandonment of what it means to be a real man, or what it means to be a real woman, what it means to be a mature adult, in favor of leisure time. So in Muslim societies, the rise of leisure is associated with coffee, actually. So it's the same thing in American society as well. I mean, the number one, if you want to do a restaurant chain, the number one restaurant chain here is Starbucks in the United States. Coffee is an American beverage, and leisure too is an American pastime. You don't believe me? Try to call somebody during Super Bowl time, right? We got a holiday every single month, right? We love to relax, vacations, extra time, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the ulama said that what's the potential wrong is that leisure itself can cause a problem for mature adults achieving a high level of spiritual perfection. Right? That's the problem, and it can interfere with people's dedication to social responsibility. So they become concerned about just their own self. They're not concerned about society, right? So instead of throwing trash away, they'll leave trash on the ground expecting somebody else to pick it up. Right? And then you get litter. And you get an expectation that somebody else will take care of it. But they don't take initiative. They're not responsible, right? Because they're used to relaxation. Coffee provides a profound discussion about this. We're dealing with societies that have abandoned, in the general sense, not in the specific sense or particular, but in general, social responsibility at the corporate level, at the communal level, at the family level, and even at the individual level. This is something for us to ponder. So when we represent Islam to coffee drinkers, we represent an Islam that speaks the language first of responsibility and social responsibility and relevance and maturity. Even in our leisure time should be purposeful, with the proper niyyah, with the proper hadaf and objective. Because everything, even leisure, is a ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even relaxation is a ni'mah. So even relaxing has an objective to it. Social media. We're dealing with a public that consumes social media, just like they consume coffee. But what's interesting is that the challenges that coffee presented to the Muslim world in the 16th century and the 17th century, well, 16th century to be accurate, the challenges that it presented to the Muslim world back then are the same kinds of challenges that social media presents to us today. So there's the question of a new kind of space that opens up. The coffee house in the 16th century. Well, now the coffee house is a normal part of society. But this new space is MySpace. It's Facebook. It's Twitter. It's the internet. Forms of social media. It's a new abstract space. And it's a real space. In the same way the coffee house was a real space. And that real space has real meaning for many people. Even though that's a space that is 100% devoted to representations. Some of them real, most of them majaz and metaphorical. I had a brother ask me once when I was in Istanbul, a brother sent me an email. He said, "Can you ask the Shaykh a question for me?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Can you ask the Shaykh, is it jaiz, is it permissible to perform Salatul Jum'ah virtually on the internet?" So in other words, can you stay in your home or be at your job, and let's say there's live stream at the masjid, and you're in your cubicle, right? Can you log on to the masjid's website and just observe the khutbah from your desk? You know, still taking calls and or filing or whatever. Is it jaiz to do a virtual Jum'ah? So I asked one of my teachers, I said, I have this strange question from a talib, is it jaiz to perform a virtual Jum'ah? And he was sipping coffee. And he put his coffee down and he said, Subhanallah, like that. And he said, if he does a majaz Jum'ah, his thawab will be majazi. That his reward will be virtual. So you do virtual Jum'ah, you get virtual reward. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't accept anything virtual. Inna Allah ta'ala tayyibun, la yaqbalu illa tayyib. Allah ta'ala is real, pure, and only accepts the real deal. Pure, what is good, what's tahir, what is free of khubuth, things that are danas and low and not worthy. The real virtual world is a world that permeates the psyches and the realities of the average day person on the street and in the offices. They are accustomed to metaphorical realities. But we as a people are people of haqiqah. Even our kebabs are haqiqi kebabs. Right? We don't even want majaz kebabs. We want real kebabs. Now people can marry online. They can have communities online. They have friendships online. Everything is related to us, which ajib. Everything online is presented through a screen, through a hijab, or through a veil, right? Hajj. So people are addicted to screens. People are addicted to veils. I mean, that's what we and I have to understand, that we're dealing with a society who is completely consumed by veils and screens. Hey, TVs, iPhones, laptops, everything is about screens and veils. So these are people who get their information through barriers. And what's interesting is that every screen, all of these present that information through false light. It's not real light. Right? It's false light in reality. Electrical light is not real light. It's not the light of the sun. It's not the light of this. It's light that is shifted through so many things. So the light that illuminates their world is even false light. SubhanAllah. So the light is false. Then their entry into that is through a screen. That world is through a screen, and then they're sucked in, and they not only consume what's on or behind, actually, the screen, but they are consumed by what is behind the screen as well. And then they take that to other domains. So they go to the movie theater, right? And that's screened off, right? And then they go out in public, and all of a sudden they have a problem with hijab. They have a problem with real screens, right? So social media produces an individual who lives in a different kind of world. And now psychologists are presenting more and more research about what this majazi world is doing to our psychologies. There's a profound article that just came out in The Atlantic a few days ago. It's been all over the news and NPR, etc., BBC, about the effects of smartphones and social media on the new generation that was born after 1995, right? So teenagers, essentially, and everyone else, from the teenage world and college students, that you are dealing with individuals who now, because of their consumption of a screened world and a majazi world and a different world, because of that space, they're more prone to mental health illnesses. They're more prone to feelings of isolation, depression, and that the more they buy into that screen and that world, the more the depression and isolation increases. And the more you unplug from that and give them real human beings to engage with, the more their happiness spikes. SubhanAllah. So this has ramifications for us as Muslims in our representation, that we have to not introduce Islam through screens. Okay? We can't do that and expect profound change at the ground level. We have to introduce Islam to youth and to adults through interpersonal, real, hakiki relationships. Yeah, we cannot claim to be people of haqq, who worship haqq, who are concerned about the world of haqq, and then all of a sudden we try to transmit haqq through a majaz, a metaphorical medium. Yeah, it's not going to work like that. So you get virtual effect. You're going to get virtual Muslims who have a virtual sense of responsibility, virtual dedication, virtual ziyada in their iman, which is more virtual than hakiki. And then we get what we get in society. So this we have to think about, that our consumption of coffee has caused us to enter into a world of profound leisure, where our dedication to individual responsibility and social responsibility has been compromised. And there's a lot more to say about that, but because of time, we cannot. I think we have to stop for adhan, if I'm not mistaken. And then last 10 seconds. Last 10 seconds, in social media, we're dealing with the transmutation of that old space into a new space, and it is virtual. And that has mental health, intellectual, psychological ramifications on each and every person. And this, one of the solutions, is real interpersonal encounters and interactions, not abstract ones. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll break for salah. Now I think we'll have the adhan, salah, inshallah, and then we'll wrap up, inshallah ta'ala, after salat, and we'll open for questions and answers. Inshallah ta'ala. قولي قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So inshallah ta'ala we'll wrap up inshallah ta'ala, but there's, this, you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. So I ask you, inshallah, in your interpersonal connections with each other, reflect on these things inshallah ta'ala, and other matters. So zombies. There's Basim there. Basim. Zombies, if you consume something, brothers and sisters, from pop culture, particularly theater, nothing is written just for entertainment purposes. Nothing. In theater, in filmmaking, in my previous life, I used to be a student of filmmaking. There is no such thing as somebody sitting down and say, hey, what do people want to like and what do they like, and you sit down and write a story. That does not exist. There is some kind of deeper commentary that's there. The zombie genre was introduced as a commentary about society and particularly the breakdown of social relationships. It's a commentary of how we live and feed off of each other without feeding each other and helping each other live. It's a commentary about how we as a society do not do enough to ensure the well-being of our fellow neighbors and our fellow community members. George Romero, the inventor of the zombie series, he was the first person, he wrote Night of the Living Dead, produced that film, and then there was a series of other films that came after it, and other writers as well. Even The Walking Dead, the current zombie series, all of them are commentaries about what happens when we abandon our commitment to each other, what makes us human. Ibn Khaldun, rahimahullah, mentions in his muqaddimah that the meaning of what it means to be an insan, and he takes this from the Quran. If you do an analysis, if you read the Quran and with the intention of looking for the different words for human beings. So obviously there's Bani Adam, there's Nas, there's Unas, right? There's Insan, and then there are all these sifat, Mu'mineen, Kafirin, the sifat. Not the sifat, but the titles for human beings themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses different terms to convey different meanings. Ins, Insan, Nas, Unas, Bashar, right? Bashar, Bani Adam. Why different terms for human beings? It's because each term emphasizes a different aspect of our humanity. Bashar emphasizes the external presentation of our humanity that separates us from the animal kingdoms, that we don't have hair all over our bodies, at least most of us don't. Right? We introduce ourselves with our skin, Bashar. And that is important because we as human beings readily accept the zahir. We readily accept the presentation. And the things presented to us, we take it easily. So that's why the social media world is so attractive for many people. Whatever's literally on the internet, we just take it as truth. But in reality, that's a problem. Bashar. So the commentary, the idea of zombie is that we consume each other. We consume each other. We do this with social media. We do this with Facebook. We consume each other. And what I mean by consume each other, I mean not only collect information about each other, but we collect information, negative information about each other too, and we pass that on, which is haram, right? Which we shouldn't be doing. That's a form of consumption. You don't believe me? What's the Quranic definition of ghiba, of backbiting? It is to be a zombie. Am I wrong? It is to consume the flesh of your what? Your brother and your sister. Would you like that? Allah Ta'ala says. But we don't like that, but we buy into that industry. The zombie industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry when you add in costumes and merchandising and video games and DVDs and ratings and all of these things. And we have become zombified by buying into the gossip of each other, living off of the deceased leftovers of our brothers and sisters, and not just in the Muslim realm, for non-Muslims as well. Do you know, from a fiqhi point of view, from a shar'i point of view, like, you should not and we should not, I should not be watching comedic portrayals of Donald Trump. Why? It's ghibah. It's mockery. It's mockery. A Muslim doesn't mock another person. A Muslim doesn't laugh at another person. A Muslim doesn't buy into false portrayals of kadhib and ghibah and namima, right? Even if you hate the person. The Prophet ﷺ didn't endorse mockery of Abu Jahl, for example, Abu Lahab. Even shaitan you can't mock, right? I mean, even shaitan you cannot mock, subhanallah, let alone a bashar, another bashar. But we buy into comedic portrayals on Saturday Night Live and late night TV shows of all kinds of human beings. And we think it's perfectly okay to consume not only that information, but as a byproduct of that at the spiritual level, the flesh of that person. Although if that person's arm were served to us on a plate, we would run away. It's the same thing. One is haqiqi, in the real sense of eating a person. The other is majazi. But the sin of that majazi effort is haqiqi, is the problem. Right? So we don't see it as a real act of slandering and backbiting, but it is. We as Muslims cannot buy into that. We can't. We cannot buy into the destruction of other people, even if that person is somebody distasteful to us. Right? I mean, look at the Anbiya in the Quran. Allah Ta'ala didn't say, buy into their destruction. Allah told Musa alayhi salam, speak to Fir'aun how? In the gentlest of ways. In the gentlest of ways. So we have to be mature. Now the other thing about the zombie industry, that is it's a critique of the human beings, and particularly American society, because George Romero, who was the writer and the inventor of the Night of the Living Dead series, which spurred this, he was concerned with the fact, and I think this is very profound, he was concerned, and he wrote about this and spoke about this, of the fact that and he's writing this in the 60s now, right? He's doing this in the 60s, and he says, we've become people that had just buy into war, right? We buy into war, and we begin to live off of the destruction of other people. So much, and we do that as a group, and we don't think about it. So just because 100 people think it's great to go to war, or 100 people think it's great to condemn and criticize something else, so just like the zombies, they function in packs, right? And the original zombie movies were about, the original ones that he wrote were about not consumption of the flesh. The original ones was about consumption of the what? The brain, subhanAllah. Right? Why? Because his point was, it's a deterioration of the intellect of the person to follow a pack, right? Just to follow the group without using this aql here. So we have to be people of aql, people of rationality. But for the Muslim, the aql person is the person who thinks not only with this organ in the head, but it's informed by the qalb as well. Right? Allah Ta'ala says they have qulub that they don't what? Yafqahun. They have hearts that don't understand and grasp, right? Contemplate, understand. So we cannot be people that engage and indulge in, number one, tearing people down, right? And engage in that spectacle as if we're an audience of watching gladiators, and we just laugh at the carnage and the blood that ensues. Well, that's what we do when we, as Muslims, buy into that. And then we have a problem when we are represented like that, and people buy into that narrative of us. Right? We have to alter that. We have to change that. So we have to be, I had a student down in Texas, a good Muslim brother who's also a physician. He was in Texas, people carry guns, right? Open carry is perfectly legal in Texas. So there are mosque protests. And it was on a Saturday afternoon, and it was in front of the masjid. And it was at a time not only for Salat, but at a time where after Salat there were kids programs. So parents were bringing their children to the masjid, and there was this protest with Islamophobic protesters who were armed and brandishing their AK-47s and their guns out in the open, and there were dozens of them. So parents had to walk their kids in, past, this scene, these signs, these demonstrations of hate and vitriol. And then on the other side were protesters protesting the protesters, okay? So these protesters were against Islamophobic rhetoric. They came to support the Muslims, tayyib. And then there were Muslims from the masjid that went out to see what was going on. The people with the guns and the Islamophobic signs were not the politest of people, but they were exercising their First Amendment rights to protest. Okay. And in the state of Texas, to protest with open carry. All right. In the presence of kids. I'm so happy we moved from Texas. Anyway, so the guys who were protesting, the protesters, started to get upset at the other group for protesting. And they started to throw water. They started to spit. I'm not joking. They started to curse. They started to try to incite the protesters with guns into crossing a line. So they were doing all kinds of horrible things. So one of the brothers said, hold on for a second. He said, what you're doing, talking about those protesters who claim to be supporting Muslims, who claim to be demonstrating in support of the masjid, he said, what you're doing is hurting not only us as a Muslim community, but it's hurting you as well. And after like 20 minutes, all the Muslims were debating and arguing outside of the masjid with the protesters that originally came to support the Muslims, but it crossed a line. Because the Muslims had said, this is not something our deen stands for. This is not right. Because two wrongs don't make a right. The people with the guns were absolutely shocked. They were just standing there in awe, looking at two sides that were supposed to be supportive of each other, now one against the other. And the side that thought that they were supporting Muslims were surprised. We thought you guys wanted this stuff. We thought you guys would love this. No, this is not what we stand for. This is not who we are. If you're coming to bring this, you've come to the wrong place. At the end of the day, do you know what happened? SubhanAllah. The Muslims took the armed protesters to lunch at a halal meat store, at a halal restaurant. Halal guys. It took them to halal guys, right? And they had halal burgers and talked about Islam and representation. And at the end of that conversation, the guy who was like leading the protest, who was there with them, said, I never talked to a Muslim. Everything I knew about Islam was online. Something somebody sent me, something I read. Never talked to a Muslim, just part of the group, part of the zombie group. Whatever you eat, I'll eat. He tasted haqiqi kebab, halal kebab. He got a taste of something different. Changed his mind. He agreed to further sit-down conversation. This was a guy, never met a Muslim, but was ready to go in front of a masjid with his gun, armed. And he went to the restaurant armed too. But they had a civil conversation. This is what I'm talking about. So, as a society, our society has been affected not just by the zombie industry, but the zombie industry is actually a reflection and a commentary of where our society has gone. And as Muslims, we cannot just consume what everybody else consumes and think that we're special. We have to critique our consumption because we are consumed by what we consume. Not only at the level of akil and eating, but akil bima'na, a more holistic form of consumption. Yani what you eat, what you see is a form of consumption. What you hear is a form of consumption. What you put in your mouth is a form of consumption. What you spend and what you buy in your possessions in your home, how you organize your home is a form of consumption. What you hoard is a form of consumption. It's who you are. So don't buy like they buy. Don't eat like they eat. Don't drink like they drink. Do it better. Rise above the fray. Don't be a zombie. Don't be someone who's just part of the industry. Because the industry is a reflection of what reality is. So be a new reality so that a new representation and a new reflection can emerge to counter the negative reflection and the negative representation that's already there. So be something different. Give them something different to write about. Give them something new to write about. And that brings me to the conclusion, Islamophobia. Because the one thing that's different, that makes Islamophobia different from coffee, from social media, and from zombies, is that Americans consume coffee, they consume, and they're consumed by it. Americans consume social media, and they're consumed by it. And Americans love the zombie industry and are consumed by it, by that kind of industry, whether it's an actual zombie movie or it's in the tweets and the Facebook tweets and the Facebook posts and the photographs that depict the demoralization and the mocking of people. They're consumed by it. They love it. Right? But what makes Islamophobia different from the other three is that they consume Islamophobia, but they have not yet consumed Islam. The prevailing studies demonstrate, Gallup polls, Pew polls, different, what's the organization from Dalia Mujahid, the Institute of ISPO, right? They did a poll. All of them say the same thing, that Americans in this country still do not know Islam. They don't. It's the only religion they still have not been introduced to in the real way. They don't understand it. That means you and I have work to do. The average American has not yet met a Muslim in person. They consume everything online. Why should they? Where are the Muslims? We're in the masjid, which is great on one hand, which is horrible on another. Great on one hand, because we come to the masjid for our ubudiyah, to recharge our battery. That's good. But why do we do that? It's because we're supposed to be doing what outside the masjid? Working for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being representatives of this deen. Representative, yani representing. That's what a representative does. Represent. Because everybody has a conception of something. Right? So they represent. So think about these things. When we rise from the times we're in, rise from these ashes, it's about representation, brothers and sisters. Representing. Representing Islam to a population that is interested in social responsibility but has lost all the core of what that means at many different levels. Just look at how many people we lock up and don't rehabilitate. Right? Look at how many people are killed. Right? Look at how many people are abandoned, like in the hospital. Look at how many, just it goes on and on and on. By a public that wants reality and thinks that they can find it behind a screen and false light. Right? And that knows nowhere else to look. Right? Because everywhere else is filled with darkness. Right? And we have to be people of light. That's what we're supposed to be, people of nur. Right? And also, how can you be a person that has a qalb that is alive when all you do is consume dead meat all day long? Right? Consume each other. At some point, we have to be the community that says, this is not right. The way that brother intervened in that protest and said, this is not right. Don't consume that. Don't do that. Don't be a victim like that. So in my conclusion, I want to tell you a story. and I'll end on this inshallah. Then we'll have, I think, questions and answers. And this is the last story that my teacher told me when I was leaving from Istanbul, from my studies, to return to the United States. And I'll share it with you. So he said there was a sultan. And the sultan had a dog that he loved. And he used to put all kinds of jewels on the dog and give the dog the best food to consume. And the dog even had its own guards. So one day the sultan decides to go outside of the palace gates and check on his subjects in Istanbul and go to the market. So he arranges his entourage, and the dog, mind you, has never been out of the palace. He doesn't know what the real world is like. So the sultan arranges his entourage and everyone, and the palace gates open and they leave. So as they're walking the streets, the sultan and his entourage checking the markets, saying salam to everyone, etc., looking over how constructions are going, how people are eating, if things are going right in the market, and kada and kada. And the dog is amazed, and people are amazed. What kind of dog is this? Look at the jewels. The sultan loves his dog so more than his children even, right? So the dog notices other dogs, and he notices that those street dogs are feeding and consuming a dead carcass. And they're gnawing at it, and they're enjoying it and fighting over it. And because he sees them gnawing at it and fighting over it and attracted to it, so he says it must be attractive. So he lunges to go to the meat, the dead carcass. And the dog is attached to the sultan's leash. So when he lunges, the sultan moves like this. He grabs hold of the leash and pulls the dog back. He says, no, no, no. That's not what you consume. It's not for you. It's not your level. So the dog doesn't understand. He sees other dogs eating it, loving it, must be good. So he lunges at it again, pulls the sultan. The sultan grabs the leash, pulls back, says, no. I said, no, this is not who you are. You embarrass me, you disrespect me like this. It's not, I feed you the best of lamb, the best of food. Why do you want to go eat a dead animal with other stray dogs? Other animals have fleas and stuff, and I adorn you with all this beautiful garb. How dare you? Stay with us, not with them. So the dog listens to the sultan, but sees the crowd. Lunges again. Sultan says, I told you, and I'm not going to say it again. Next time, if you decide to go in that direction one more time, I shall leave you. I'll let you have it. The dog looks, and lunges. Goes for the crowd. The sultan lets the leash go. And the dog jumps into the crowd of other dogs and starts gnawing and consuming the dead meat. And the other dogs are fighting with him. He's eating. And then suddenly, he notices the taste of the meat is not like the meat from behind the palace. It's putrid, filthy, has maggots in it. The taste is not good. The smell is not good. It's horrible. What's beautiful and attractive to all the other dogs is disgraceful to him. He can't understand why they enjoy it. So the vizier leans over to his sultan and he says, "Oh, my sultan, shall I go and remove the gems from around his neck and the cloak that you put on him?" And the sultan, he says, "No, leave it. Let it be a reminder of what he could have been, where he used to be." And he left. And they go back, and the doors close, and the dog, realizing his mistake, he starts to get sick and vomits. Then he wants to go back inside, the door's closed. It's too late. Don't be like the dog. This is what my teacher told me. Don't be like the dog. Don't follow the crowd. You have your own teaching. You have your own tradition. You have your own diet. You've been adorned with the adornment of La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah. You've been embellished with the surahs of the Quran. You're on a leash, though you don't feel like you have a collar. You're on a leash. You're connected by the presence of your teachers. and their teachers and all of their teachers, going back to Habib al-Mustafa sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. We're not, you think you're free, you're not free. You have a leash on your neck. And it could be that if by result of just blind following and being a zombie, we choose to consume in the same way, in the same habits, in the same manners, what everybody else consumes, it's just a matter of time before we incur the displeasure of Allah Ta'ala. And if we're not careful, He releases us. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, O people of Iman, man yartad minkum an deenih, whoever goes back away from his deen, فَسَوْفَ يَأْتِي اللَّهُ بِقَوْمٍ, Allah Ta'ala will bring a new people, يُحِبُّهُمْ وَيُحِبُّونَ, that they love Allah and Allah loves them. We're all replaceable. Don't forget. So represent and understand you are, men and women, representatives of this legacy, of this deen that many have bled, sweat, sacrificed, died, starved, been beaten. They've, before us, I was walking in the streets and had my grammar book, under my arm. And one of the higher students said to me, "Why do you carry your grammar book like that?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Do you know how many ulama have died because of that grammar book in Turkey when it was going to a Turkish state?" He said, "My uncle was hanged, my great uncle," he said, "was hanged from a street light because he was walking in the street with that Nahu book." I had just a grammar book to me. But a grammar book, some people have died to learn Arabic grammar to pass on this tradition. We are ambassadors, men and women, in this country. We have to represent. We have to represent. We have to rise from the ashes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wake us up. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us rise and learn and guide. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for our shortcomings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate our rank in His eyes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala imbue in us love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and actions that are pleasing to Him, both external actions and internal actions. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Barakallahu feekum, Shaykh Khalil. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase you with increased wisdom and understanding of His deen, and bless you and your family and your children. Ya Rabbil Alameen. SubhanAllah, as Shaykh Khalil was speaking, and I was reflecting on the theme of rising from the ashes, a verse just kept on hitting me in the face the entire time he was speaking, which is the verse in Surah Qaf, when Allah Jalla Ala speaks about our own resurrection on the Day of Judgment. And He says, لَقَدْ كُنْتَ فِي غَفْلَةٍ مِّنْ هَذَا فَكَشَفْنَا عَنْكَ غِطَاءَكَ فَبَصَرُكَ الْيَوْمَ حَدِيدٌ. Where Allah Jalla Ala in the Quran says that you were ignorant and mindless of this truth that Shaykh Khalil has been elucidating for us. You were mindless of it and forgetful of it. And today we will now expose you to that truth. فَكَشَفْنَا عَنْكَ غِطَاءَكَ. All of the barriers and all of the virtual realities that were blinding you, now they will be lifted and you will see clearly the truth. And so the lesson that is for us is to even understand that even in these physical bodies, there's a virtual quality to it. And that this body that you and I have, it will too be subsumed and consumed by the earth, because itself is virtual in many ways. And the only thing that will remain is the soul, this spirit that Allah Jalla wa Ala has breathed into us. And that is the essential truth. And so the nourishing is of the soul. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala nourish our souls always when we're in these types of blessed gatherings. May these gatherings always be for us. And may we never be deprived of these gatherings. As the Prophet ﷺ said, these are the gatherings of light, the gatherings of increase, the gatherings of elevation. May Allah never deprive us of such gatherings, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Inshallah, if there are maybe one or two questions, because we've gone, mashallah, quite over time, but it was always in beauty and benefit, barakallahu feekum. If there's one or two questions, Shaykh Khalil will take them. If not, then barakallahu feekum.
Assalamu alaikum. I understand a lot of virtual thing you talk about how we've been consumed, but I didn't get what we have to do physically. And the other thing with virtual, don't we have to talk same language that people understand, like the media and social media, to get him to our side a little bit? Jazakallah.
Jazakumullahu khairan. I think in terms of the latter, social media can be a supportive element, but not the primary element. So this is what I was trying to convey. So we must not rely on social media to do our day-to-day jobs for us, to compensate for our inability or refusal or lack of interest, or laziness, if you will. What can we do? Every single day when we leave the house, we encounter people. One of the things that we must do is be very cognizant that we are being observed. First of all, at the spiritual level, so the malaika are observing us and writing down what we do. And of course, above them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, it matters at the spiritual level what we do. It also matters at the physical level what we do. So each and every action, we must try over time to get to the point where each and every action we do, or encounter, let me say it like this, every encounter we have, that we respond in a way that if that were the last action that we did on earth, in other words, if that were the last thing, Allah would be pleased with us and the person we encountered would be changed and different by it. So that means that you must live not with the plan to live, another week or another day. You must live moment by moment. You must live moment by moment. Because in reality, the next 5 minutes are not guaranteed. So moment by moment becomes very, very important. So every single moment when you're outside, when you're in the present, you're representatives. You're people of da'wah. You're people of hidayah. You represent. The women, it's more obvious that they're representative in some cases than the men, in the sense that it's more common for Muslim women to wear hijab, for example. So it may be more obvious that non-Muslims, when they encounter some Muslim women, they see, oh, this is a Muslim. And in some men, it may not be the same. But as Muslim men, we should still strive and Muslim women, everybody strive to perform the best action at every given moment. If you perform the best action at every moment, that action becomes a dalala, an indicator of the beauty of your Islam. That best action will override the normal actions that people encounter and see on a day-to-day basis. It's a beautiful story about how there's a man who wanted to test the Prophet ﷺ. And so he takes a loan from the Prophet ﷺ, agreeing that the Prophet ﷺ will pay it back on a particular day, right? You know the story, and the man intentionally goes before the due date, just to test the Prophet ﷺ to see if he's Rasulullah ﷺ. So in the man's mind, it's a test. Right? Some people will test you to see, are you real Muslim or not, right? So he goes back and says, and he insults the Prophet ﷺ, trying to provoke. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala is with the Prophet ﷺ. And the man, he goes, oh, you Hashemites, you never pay your bills on time. Oh, you people from Bani Hashim, you're always late in paying your bills. Right? So he insults the Prophet ﷺ, but he was trying to provoke him. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, we all know Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. He said, you know who this is? The mafi ma'anahu, yani. If you say something like that again, khalas, it's to be over. Do you know who you're talking to? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ya Umar, this is what I like for all of us to take home. He said, what he and I need from you is something better. That point there. What these people and each other, us, what Americans need from American Muslims is something different. Be different. In the khair sense. He said, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, why didn't you tell me to pay my bills? And why didn't you tell him to speak more kindly? Said, Ya Umar, go pay him from this place and give him extra because you frightened him. شفت المعنى, look at that. Give him extra, compensate him because you frightened him. Yeah, these people are afraid, man, in many cases. These people don't know Muslims. They don't know us. So what they need from us is something more. They need us to be like that. So in our dealings with them, we should not have normal dealings with anybody that we encounter. Each and every moment is a moment, as I tried to mention, to rise above the fray. Yani what is, in the words of our teachers, ما هو الأفضل والأولى والأحسن العمل في الوقت. What is the best, preferred, most beautiful action you can do at that moment? Strive to do that action instead of setting the bar, sort of being a child of the routine. Right? That's what we have to be afraid of. Inshallah ta'ala, I hope that is answered. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakum Allah khair, barakallahu feekum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless and increase Shaykh Khalil. May this be the first of many times where he comes and spends time with us, and this will be really, if any Harvard students in here? Or Harvard potential, where's, who? Emily? And my wife, Mr. Hanan, okay. Who else? One over there? Because I have some beef with Harvard students that I'm gonna pick with their new leader, inshallah, and we're gonna resolve some of that. But inshallah, hopefully, the relationships between all of the Muslims in the Boston and greater Boston community are only strengthened, and that we come together regularly in community and spend time together to remember Allah, to praise Allah, and to be in the remembrance of our beloved Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Barakallahu feekum. Allah increase you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.